I want to show you some ways that you can use the Stress Detective Clue Cards as a treatment tool, not just an interview. There's three things I'm going to share with you today. Number one, first of all, problem solving, pretty basic, because this is why we even use the cards in the first place, is to find the things that children could perceive as problems. So we're going to take some of the things maybe that they rated as a big problem or something that they rated as they can't handle, and we're going to see if we can help them solve the problem. Now, when we do the interview, we don't usually use all the cards. So there's probably some cards in here that we can pull out even for our treatment task that we didn't use during our interview. And when we do the interview, sometimes it's really hard to get a lot of the details from children just because there's so many cards and we want to make sure we get through the cards, and maybe more urgent ones are going to be ones that I'm going to ask questions of. But what if I'm using this for problem solving? I'm going to use this one as an example. My client Jasmine has rated cats as a big problem. So I'm going to ask a little more about that first. So I'm going to say, tell me more about that. Why is this card here? And I'm going to try to learn a little bit more information from her and figure out what's going on. Maybe she's never even around cats, right? This might not be a problem we even have to worry about solving. But I could also use this, even if it's not a problem for her, I could say, well, if another child's afraid of cats and in this, similar situation that they have a cat at their house, what's something you think that would help them? So we can even use it from that perspective. But it turns out that Jasmine doesn't have any cats at her house. She's got a cat at her grandma's house that she's kind of nervous about because it scratched her once. And so she goes over there once in a while for a sleepover. And I'm going to ask her, okay, well, what's something that would help solve that problem? She may come up with something. Kids have great ideas. I've learned so much from them over the years. And she might just be able to come up with a solution. And often when kids don't have solutions, that's when we're seeing more problems from them. So it can be really hard for the kids that we tend to see. She may not have a solution, so I'm going to feed her maybe a little gradually. Okay, is there something you could say to your grandma that might help with this? Okay. And I might have to actually feed her some ideas like, well, can you ask your grandma if she can put the cat in another room on the days that you visit, since it's just once in a while. That might be something. So now I've just given her the opportunity and some language to self-advocate. So as we pull up other problems to work on problem solving, that's one of our ways to solve a problem, is to ask for something that you need and to tell people how you feel. So there might be something else that we can pull out and we'll say, well, remember when we talked about the cat, you did this, and those were the ideas that we had. Do you think that might work for this situation? So, we're going to pull these out gradually. It's going to be not an overnight process, of course, but that's one thing you can do with these cards. Number two, another thing that you can do is work on perspective taking, especially if you have a small group. This is great for that. So I'm just going to stick with my cat card here, and we're going to pretend that Luna has rated the cat card as not a problem, and Rocco has rated it as a medium problem, and Quinn has rated it as a big problem. Okay, so I'm going to get a little more information in our group to say, okay, Luna, tell me more about that, and Rocco, tell me more about that, and Quinn, tell me more about that. And by the way, those are my cats' names. And those are actually pretty fair assessments of how they probably feel about cats. So at least the ones in our family, the ones that they live with. So tell me a little more about that. So I'm going to learn a little bit more, and then what we're going to do is we're going to pull out the dog card, or maybe one of the other animal cards, and say, let's guess how Luna feels about dogs now that we know a little bit how she feels about cats. Is that going to translate to dogs? We're going to have some of that information now to see what she thinks. And we're going to guess. Right? The other kids are going to guess what Luna would put, and then Luna's going to tell us, and we're going to learn a little bit more about what Luna thinks. We'll do that for all the kids. So that's one thing you can do. Now that one's there's some food ones that might relate to, like crunchy foods and soft foods, and cards with other things like that you can also use pretty simply. There's a lot of other animals. And then there's some that are more abstract, like as we get to know the kids especially, we might say, well, how does Rocco feel about not being first in line? And we're going to just guess. So we may not have, more fair comparison like dogs and cats in this. Say, well, how do you think they're going to feel about that? And we're going to try to figure out how other people feel. Now, if you're in an individual session, especially if you're in like a school and there's other adults around, you can make guesses about, or other children, you can make guesses about what they might say, and you can go see if you're right. So we're going to see, how would the school nurse feel about cats? Or how would the school nurse feel about, being called on when they didn't raise their hand? We don't necessarily know, but the more you can compare that not everyone has the same opinion as you and feelings about things, it can help you understand perspectives of other people. So problem solving, perspective taking, you can also use the cards to help work on what you can and can't control. So when it's kids are anxious, they want certainty. Life doesn't give you certainty, and life doesn't give you control over a lot of things. So, for example, being called on when you didn't raise your hand, that's a really uncomfortable feeling if that really bothers you in school, and you might get called on at any moment. Yeah, raise your hand if that's something that bothered you. I did not like that either. And so I would never have even thought that there was a solution to that problem. It's just an anxiety I have to live with, right? So, but we can tell them, right, there is something that you can control. So this might be part of our problem solving lesson too. We can talk to your teacher about that. They may not know that it's even an option on an IEP plan or 504 plan to have this as an accommodation where no one's going to call on them. But it might also be something that they would be able to ask the teacher themselves, or need some support to do that. So now I've taught them this one strategy that they can ask for what they need and advocate for themselves. And how can we do that? Maybe they need some other ways to do that if it's uncomfortable to have a direct conversation with the teacher, but that's one of the things that you can do. But then you have things like brushing your teeth. Okay, so we have this uncomfortable sensory experience. Of course, we're going to get the details of why it's uncomfortable. Is it the sensation of the toothbrush? Is it the taste of the toothpaste or the texture of the toothpaste? So we're going to find out what is the problem here. Brushing your teeth is really not an option because you need it for your health. And so your control here is not to just not brush your teeth, but where is somewhere you do have control? Well, you can maybe pick a different kind of toothpaste. Again, this might be some self-advocacy. So if we can find little things like that they can control with this, it might give them more feelings of autonomy and comfort for the things that do cause them problems. And again, you can use this with some same kind of technique with the problem solving and perspective taking. Well, okay, maybe this one's not a problem for you. Can you help me figure out, I know somebody who doesn't like to brush their teeth because of the taste of the toothpaste. What is something that might help them feel better? So we can use kind of scenarios like that as well, if it's not something you need a problem directly with that child. And sometimes that's easier for some children. Or we can have a stuffed animal with us that, okay, my friend Bear here doesn't like to brush his teeth. What's something that would help him feel better about that? And so we can use stuffed animals and things like that as well to help us teach some of these lessons. So there's lots of different cards, way more than you'd even need in your interview, that can also be used to help with problem solving, perspective taking, and helping children understand what they can and can't control. I hope you find this helpful, and I hope the cards help you with your practice.